Okay, I was waiting for the go live, and we are officially live streaming YouTube. Love modern technology. So as you guys know, we stream our morning session via our CalVCP YouTube channel. As it streams, it's also recording. So we have our JP counties either watching live, or if they have buffering issues, it records it so they can watch it later. And then we can also send it out to our partners and other members who are interested in our trauma-informed events. So welcome and good morning to welcome to our March Trauma-Informed Workshop. I'm very excited to have Mindi Russell here. I've seen Mindi speak a couple of times in the last year because we've just happened to be at some of the same conferences together, and she usually speaks right before me, and she's a tough act to follow, and you'll see why. She's very passionate about her work. She's the executive director of the Law Enforcement Chaplaincy, and this is a chaplaincy that is a nonprofit and serves all the law enforcement agencies in our county. And so she'll talk a little bit more, I'm sure, about her role, her work. But today's focus is really on something that I've gotten a lot of requests for lately. You know, we've been doing these trauma-informed workshops for a little over a year now. And I think we've had about 12 workshops. And one of the most popular ones still is when Dr. Linda Bernard came and talked about how to communicate with victims who have experienced a trauma and how the trauma has really impacted their brain and how they process information. So I've been looking for a really good speaker to come out and go a little deeper with you about what to say, what not to say, how to be compassionate and empathetic when you're talking to crime victims or their family members. So that's what we're really going to be focusing on today. So on that note, Mindi, please come on up. Let's give her a round.
Well, thank you very much. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I am going to kind of just tell you a little bit more about the chaplaincy, because a lot of times when people hear chaplains, oh, why is she here to talk? We do not make you get in a circle and sing Kumbaya. So relax. We really do have a very unique organization that basically answers those questions: who, what, where, why. And the reason why we do that is because we're unique across the nation. We do more than just go around helping law enforcement. So we have about 110 trauma-trained chaplains. That's very important to know because we're constitutional, we're not congregational. Constitutional means that we have a secular purpose and we're religiously neutral. It doesn't matter what religion or no religion a victim is, we're going to be with them. And because we serve 19 different agencies, city, county, state, law enforcement, we're able to be there within 20 minutes of what is happening across this county. We will later on this year activate a statewide mutual aid because of things like San Bernardino, and we could talk about that later. I am going to give you a couple minutes for questions and answers at the end. But we have a mission, and it's very simple, just to bring hope to first responders and our community. Because I'm going to tell you, when somebody has had a tragedy, a crisis, a trauma happen, it has absolutely shattered their foundation. Every single victim I have ever worked with, and mind you, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. Yes, I was 6 years old when I started. But every victim has said something very similar to this. I never thought this would happen to me. You've heard that, haven't you? Because we never really do believe it's going to happen to me, my family, even my friends. And so when we are talking to people, we have to kind of pick up pieces that are charred away from them to be able to gather, again, a foundation and a core and an anchor of them being able to just stand as a person of what they used to be. But they will never, ever be that person. They'll be a new kind of normal person. That's another expression you'll hear, that what you all help us do, if we're the first responders to the victims, then when you are there with that family, you're helping them additionally process what has happened to them. And moving on, we're accessible, one number, confidential, 24 hours. We're accessible. We have over 110 chaplains. Last year we responded in 96,000 hours last year with 8 people, a 12-hour shift. All right, and we have to have them continually trained. These are not people that just say, hey, I want to help. You've got to be trained, because I absolutely challenge people that try to help people and don't have the training, and they actually do further harm. Have you had people like that? My gosh, sometimes family members hurt people by their ways of action and words. And of course, like you, confidentiality is our foundation. If we didn't have that confidence or that confidentiality, it wouldn't be much of a program, would it? So when media is all swarming around, you're going to find if we even are talking, it's never about Joe Smith. It's always about people that have had a trauma experience this. We never point to the person. So those are just to kind of blow you out of the water. Just here in the county, can you believe 38,000 people needed our help last year? 4,600 call-outs. And because we have to say that, that's our commercial. Drink a cup of coffee, or better yet, buy a cup of coffee. Well, we can talk about later. But here, let's go into it. What kind of victims of crisis do you work with? You see up here things like those pictures. What do you see and can relate to? What do you see up there as a picture? What's the little girl? What would that kind of represent? Child abuse, maybe death in her family. How about the middle picture, top middle? Overdose, suicide. How about the one on the right side, the crib? What do you think that represents? SIDS, okay. Homicide, a fatal collision, and then that's a natural disasters. How about that one down on the lower left? What do you think that one's about? Domestic violence, could be, and home invasion, and then of course assault of some kind. So how many of you work with people like that? Okay, so when you're working with people like that, to the average person in our community, remember, everybody thinks it's never going to happen to them. They don't see people's faces. They see pictures that are very abstract to them, or they see words. They don't want to go deeper than homicide when they're reading in the paper. They don't want to go deeper than there was this many percentage rise in crime or lower in crime. They don't want to go any deeper, because that might make them have to think a little bit harder about what if it happened to me. Is there anything besides these pictures that you deal with people in crisis? Any other things that you're thinking about? So a lot of what you're dealing with is either death or potential death, right? So we call that critical incident. Critical incidents has a component that every one of your people that you deal with has experienced. One, that while it was happening to them, they had tunnel vision. They don't remember a lot about everything else. They remember what happened to them, right? And I guarantee you, when they tell you their story, they're going to tell you the worst part of it for them. The mind takes pictures, and the thing that it settles on is the worst part of it for them. That's what gets enhanced. So the tunnel vision stays there. And as part of the team of helpers to get this person from here to there, a new kind of normal, we're actually trying to get them to see a bigger story. They need to see the beginning of the story, and more important, they need to see there's an end to the story, and you're part of the end of that story. That's a page, if you would. Their story is never going to end, right? But there is different parts of the story that they tell. So there are other things about people in crisis. Look at those kind of pictures that you're seeing up there. When we speak to people in crisis, we need to understand that they need more than just words out of our mouth. And that's what I'm going to tell you, because people will forget what you've said to them. People will forget what you did for them. People will remember how you made them feel. And if they don't ever remember your name or what you look like, that is a compliment. Because that means that you have succeeded in helping them feel that they've been helped. It's the ones that can remember. Yeah, I remember that guy. He had black hair. He didn't smell good. And then all of a sudden they enhance everything they don't like about you, right? And everything they did wrong to me. They will be able to describe you if you made them feel not so good. But if you made them feel good and felt like they had finally gotten someone to help them, the less and less they're going to remember you, and the later they're just going to remember this wonderful person. It's amazing how we have 110 chaplains. They all look like me, even the guys, bless their hearts. I'm just saying. So crisis affects the whole person. And if we don't deal with that when we're trying to talk to them, we're going to miss something. When we talk about grief, and I know you all have gone through classes of grief, we have talked about that grief is not about death. Grief is about loss, correct? And when people have had an experience that's a crisis, that has given them that tunnel vision, and either a potential loss or they've lost something, death to a family member, or they have almost died themselves. Potential is the same as the reactions is the same as if it did happen, believe me. Their exaggerated emotions is that third component. When the whole being is affected, we need to understand that those losses are also affecting the whole being. So when they get sick because of a crisis happening, we have to deal with that loss. They have to deal with that loss. You can help them deal with that loss. The same way with when they mentally have gone through a loss, or when they have emotionally gone through the loss. And yes, people go through spiritual losses, right? When something has happened to them. So we need to know that anything that happens, any kind of emotion, any kind of reaction physically, cognitive, behavior, relationship, is really truly normal after the fact. Now, you may get them days later, hours later, days later, months later, to tell their story to you as well. But it doesn't matter. They're going to remember how they felt when it happened. And when survivors fluctuate between those diverse reactions, we also have to understand that there is a time of window of crisis when a crisis has taken place. And that window of crisis begins to start closing during that impact stage when it's happened to them. And as it closes, us, the ones that want to help them, it's harder and harder to get to them. Because when that impact stage, that window of crisis shuts, then what happens is the recoil stage. And that's when they say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it myself. And it becomes almost human nature. And when we're in a lot of pain, we cause a lot of pain. It's almost self-destructive when that recoil stage starts. Has anybody ever had a person that you've started working on? You don't have to, this is rhetorical. You've had a person that's the stage you're in. It's not the impact stage when they're saying, I don't know what just happened, but help me. They're basically in that recoil stage of saying, leave me alone. Doing it myself. They've isolated themselves. They've withdrawn. They have a whole different countenance. That self-destruction doesn't necessarily mean suicidal. It could also mean self-destruction in their attitude, their behavior, the way that they deal with relationships. And we can share story on story how I can explain that example, but I will tell you this. When we talk to people that are incarcerated, adults that are incarcerated, almost 95% of them have had some kind of trauma or crisis in their life when they were young, and no one there to intervene. And what happened? Human nature took place, and they started to act out in a self-destructive way. And when they were in pain, they caused pain. Because you see, Nobody wants to feel overwhelmed and out of control. And no one wants to feel fearful and panic-driven. And no one wants to be in emotional or physical pain. So because they don't want those, they push that down. And what comes up is anger. And that anger is what we see a lot of times, which pushes away people that want to help them. It motivates people to stay away. So what are they going to do? Now they're reaching in because they're more angry, and they're reaching out to people in a negative way. Does that make sense so far? All right. So we need to be able to understand. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Good question. That we don't even know, because each individual, this is what's so cool about working with victims. They're never the same. They're never going to be the same. Every incident is always going to be different. And so that's why we have to be sensitive that we could have done 16 homicides last year and the 17th one's still going to be as your first. So that window of crisis is the one that goes fastest. It's the one that they feel surreal and numb, and they can't believe it, and they're saying, this didn't happen, and they're kind of in denial and all that, and that's quickly moving into the recoil stage. That recoil stage can last for a long time. What we want is within 72 hours. Here's this. As a trauma responder, within 72 hours, we want to be able to respond to help intervene with that person in that crisis. Why? Because it's been proven over and over again that if you help someone in trauma and crisis within the first 72 hours, 87% never need long-term therapy. That should blow your mind, because if you think about it, how much people would get back to a new kind of normal sooner, and how much our community would be healthier. But we wait, and unfortunately family waits, friends wait. Why? Because we don't, they're a private person, or, we don't know what to say or do. So everybody kind of stands back, and those 72 hours are crucial. So the window of crisis to impact stage, we know that if we intervene, that stops within the 72 hours. They're still going to have reactions. They're still going to have all kinds of things. And then the last stage, which is a hard word, but you got to have it relative to trauma, is acceptance. You've heard that word? It's like closure. It is just a terrible word. Find a better word in the English language, and I'll pay you money for it. But they use word acceptance because it's generally where they go, I hated what happened to me. I don't think it's fair. And they go through all that process, but I've got to continue on. That's what that acceptance means. Does that make sense? It is certainly not like, yay, let's move on. No, it is a long, long journey. Does that help you a little bit? There's no time frame. And that's why you and I should never say to somebody, you'll be fine in a couple of days. No, you will not. That's why we never say, it's going to be all right. Because it might be a lot worse before it's a lot better. If it ever gets better in their mind. Okay. So the next thing is the potential physical reactions. Now, you all have the sheet of paper where you see physical reactions. If you don't, all you have to do, I'm going to give you my business card, email me, I'll send it to you. But these are physical reactions that you should be seeing. These are normal reactions, but they get exaggerated, distorted, perverted, out of wits when a crisis has happened. So let's say when you get stressed, your normal coping skill is to get a headache. Don't you just love it? I'm just going to have a headache today because I'm stressed. Not meaning that. I'm meaning that our normal coping skills are things that we have to put up with and we deal with. Everyday stress, maybe even more intense stress, eustress, significant advancements in our life, distress, significant reversals in our lives, but we deal with them. That physical symptom when there's a crisis, oh, you will get a headache. Oh, you will get a headache. But the headache's even more extreme. but it's a familiar emotion. But because it's so much more extreme, maybe more pounding, maybe more lasting, it seems abnormal. Does that make sense? So what we do is we try to help people normalize the feeling of abnormal by saying it's normal. But you got to know those reactions. You got to know what people experience in crisis and generally what to look for. So number one, when we're talking to people, is number one, you are reassuring them. You are validating them in physical reactions. And then, of course, there's the mental responses. How do we have people responding mentally or cognitively? You're going to see people in crisis with poor attention. Mind you, the front part of the brain is where our logic is, right? Our thinking, our trainings and everything. And then that part of the brain that's emotional, what ends up happening? When we're in a crisis, that takes over. Now, looking out at you all, I guarantee you there are those of you that have experienced some type of trauma or crisis in your life, right? So when I'm talking to you about what you should be looking for with other people, think about your own trauma and how you experienced it. What did you experience? Because you know what? Going back to the loss, unless we really define all the losses we've experienced in a situation, we can never truly heal. We will always be triggered in the future from that or that or that. So the mental things could be anything from the hypervigilance. Let me tell you what, people get very hypervigilant when something happens to them, or they're very increased or decrease in awareness. I have found mostly when you are working with somebody in a crisis initially, they don't care what everybody else is doing. They're focused on you. If you are their lifeline, be their lifeline. And then there's the emotional responses. This is the one that does not define the person. Sometimes the person that's a good person, good character, good standards, good morals, everything, kind of acts out differently than what they usually do. And we don't define their actions and say that that's the person, because crisis kind of takes over where we never thought we'd go. These are uncharted territories for us. And unfortunately, we don't practice for thinking what's going to happen. So we never rise up to what we expect we're going to do. We always fall back to what we've practiced. And if we don't practice, my goodness, all things go wrong. And then the last one is the behavior. Another thing that you will see. And these are things that you could see for weeks and months later, the emotional outbursts. Let me tell you what, if we don't address these situations and help them see that we're not criticizing them or judging them or telling them what they should do, but literally validating where they are at that moment, you're going to see that continue. Did you have a question? Okay. We'll have other non-specific complaints. They don't understand that. They don't understand why they just feel tired, where they just feel achy in their back and they've never had any problems with their back. They don't understand the non-specific complaints, but it's because they don't know where to put all of this new stuff. And then the spiritual responses. We see people on both extremes. Hate God, turn into God. Want to blame God, trying to trust God. And I don't know how you all deal with that. That's what your chaplains are here for too. We will be able to, if you give us a call, we will come to you and help them be able to process that if you are not able to or feel comfortable doing it. But we should never think that the person is just a body with a mind. You see, if you think about it, the body's the physical that's dictated by the 5 senses. Sight, smell, touch, taste, hearing, right? When they're in a crisis, they touch that crisis. They see that crisis. They hear that crisis. They taste that crisis. And what I mean by that is the words that come out of their mouth. The bitter words, angry words, panic words. They feel. Those senses are all surrounding that crisis. The cognitive, or the psyche, the soul of the person, that's another part where their will is and their attitudes and their opinions. All of that's part of that. But there is a deeper anchor that everybody has. That person, that faith part of the person, that's also something that a lot of times I have seen in crisis. And maybe because I'm a chaplain, I see it more, that people will go to that level deeper. Why did this happen to me? Karma. What's going to happen to that person if that happens to me? That kind of thing. Feel comfortable wherever they are in those responses. So here is the golden nugget of the day. If you learn these 5 things, you are going to be perfectly fit to help people. Have you ever said to someone, "Can I help you, Tim?" Look at you and go, "I don't know what I need," right? Do people in crisis actually know what they need? Generally, at first, they don't. They know what they don't like, but they don't know what they need. So we're going to break these things down because we have found over years and years and years, I had the pleasure, the privilege, the honor to be at Ground Zero for the first 16 days. Now, for some of you, you might be too young to even remember Ground Zero, are you? You better not be. Out. Anyway, so I was there and I worked with victims. And then for the next 3 years, I went all over the country just interviewing victims. And what I found, here's the fabric of what people need in their time of crisis. So let's talk about this. What do you mean safety? I'm not talking just about an environment that's safe, getting them away from harm, getting them in a place that no one can further harm them. But I'm also talking about mentally. I'm also talking about working on the emotional part, all those responses that they are doing, reacting, but they need to be able to feel safe with you and be able to feel safe in how they feel and how they're reacting. Now, we have a kind of a slogan where what we do in trauma out on the streets, that if they're not hurting you, they're not hurting themselves, and they're not hurting someone else, let them. Let them sit on the ground kicking their feet and scream. Let them. Let them, wail. Let them. But do not let them hurt you, and do not let them hurt themselves. It's unacceptable. But to feel safe, you've got to kind of think of what is a distraction that could help them or not help them. If we're standing out on the side of a road and there's a fatal collision, and we are not allowed by law enforcement to let this family member leave, what's the best thing we can do for that family? Put their back to the fatal accident and have them look at us. It's as simple as that. These are common sense kind of things, but a lot of times people don't think out of helping somebody. How does that look? So when we're saying safe, we also have to be a safe person. Now, working with human trafficked children, working with domestic violence, working with sexual assault, they've heard these words: trust, love. I love you. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing to you. So these words, we've got to be very, very careful. At this point in time, the predators are not using the word safe. Best we can use right now. I am a safe person. I am here for you. I will be here as long as you want me to be here. However you want to display that safe to them, you need to be that safe person, because they will know that everything else will fall in place because you're going to keep them safe, and be that safe person. Compassion. Do you have a job application that they have, are you a compassionate person? You know, you got it or you ain't got it. This is one of those things that's hard to train somebody to have compassion. You know, there are people that don't have empathy, they have sympathy. You know, they're the ones that say, gosh, it sucks to be you. You know, or man, glad that didn't happen to me. Thank you very much. Be on your way. But the people that are empathetic, when we teach in trauma, we teach trauma listening and we teach trauma response. One thing we say is, you should not be a part of their story. When you're listening to these people talk, don't become their story. Don't make it your story. If you do this well, compassion means, and this is relative, this is the word relative to trauma, you are compassionate, detached. Another word that just doesn't sound like the element for what we do, right? But honestly, to be detached means I want you to tell your story. I want you to tell it, and I want you to tell it, and I'm giving you an opportunity to tell it well. And it's not on me. Because if we go home at night and realize I was privileged to hear their story, that they felt safe enough to tell me things they never told anybody else maybe, and that I can go to sleep at night because I know I helped them. I didn't fix them. I didn't take it on. I didn't even really make it better, other than I was a connection of somebody real that heard me, heard that person's story, and knows that they're going to be able to get through it. An amazing opportunity. You know, people kind of think we're strange as chaplains saying we count it an honor to do death notifications. Anybody ever had to do a death notification? Y'all should learn how to do that. You should learn how to do it. You raise your hand? Yeah, you should learn how to do it. And count it a privilege, because the way people are being told today is outlandish. Media, Facebook, a call on the phone said, I think it was your husband in that car crash, and I think he's dead. Sorry. Or where she had a coroner's note on a door saying, call the coroner's office during the hours of 8 and 5 tomorrow for a recent loss of a loved one. What? I'll go. I'll go at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I will knock on that person's door because I know we'll do it right. And we will not leave that family member until they don't need us anymore. A good death notification for an officer, he thinks making the statement at the door and out of the way. A good death notification takes about 2 hours. Because after that life-changing message is given and the process begins, we remain there to help them do the next steps. What's the next steps? So empathy. And a lot of times people say when somebody has sympathy, some of the words they use is at least. They minimize. Like, I lost my job. Well, at least you can find another one. And I've heard people say things like, you know, my husband wants to divorce me. Well, at least you could probably find another. At least you were married. At least. So if you say those two words, check yourself. Because it's probably saying sympathy instead of empathy. Empathy, we shouldn't feel somebody's pain. That's not going to help us, and it's not going to help them. Empathy doesn't say that I will walk a mile in your shoe, really. Empathy says I will stand with you as you go through this. Because again, it's not our story, it's theirs. And then when we talk about being calm, be contagious. Be contagious. And when you're contagious, that means that calm, that soft voice, that demeanor that you come in with will be something that gets absorbed by that person. Because remember, everything that's happening to them is enhanced. even to the color of your clothes, even to what you smell like. What kind of perfume or cologne do you have? Or did you just eat a tuna fish sandwich? Or drink a pot of coffee? Be very conscious of you in their trauma. And because how many of you have, remember when the Titanic song was really popular? Oh my Lord, I will not listen to that song. 52 funerals I did that year. And every one of them had that song. So every time it comes on the radio, what am I hearing that song? I'm not hearing that song. I'm seeing that funeral and that funeral. And this is not flashbacks, it just is. So to fix that, I just turn the radio off. It's as simple as that. But sometimes people are not trained to do that. So if you come in and you've got this big bold shirt, 49ers, in big red and green and whatever, that could be another singe on their photo album in their mind. We want to be really careful that when we come in, that our demeanor is the first thing they catch, that essence of who we are, that calm, and that they're respecting where they are and what they're doing. Okay. Gentle, again, there's some of us that tend to be that personality A+. Anybody in here like that? I feel sometimes like I'm the bull in a china shop. Okay, there, I said it. You know, it's like barging in. But honestly, when you're with family, when you're with friends, you're with people that have experienced a crisis, you've got to be able to be almost fluid. Walking, being careful, not bringing attention to yourself, absorbing what's going on before you even sit down with them. You can feel things when you sit down with people to talk to them, can't you? Long before they open their mouth and speak, can't you? This is what we pick up on. You know, I know you all have a lot of cases, and I know you all have time limits for each person. They don't care. They don't care if you got 42 people you got to see that day. They don't care. You know who they care about? Themselves. And that case, their case, is the worst one ever. So it doesn't matter what you're going through. They want your complete attention. Being non-judgmental, non-critical, not giving our opinions to these people, but being a resource for these people. Now, accurate information. How many of you have to give information to people? A lot of resources, right? Okay. So we want to make sure we don't give inaccurate information. We don't give wrong information. We really are able to diffuse rumors. Now, see, with the freshness of a crisis, a lot of times there's a lot of stuff that hasn't settled yet. So we don't know maybe all the details. And instead of saying we don't know all the details, we reassure them of the details we have. People in crisis only remember about 10% of what you say anyway. So it's not saying a lot of stuff. It's just saying the same stuff over and over again well. Because sometimes that's all they need is that reassurance that you're there for them, that it's being investigated right now, that they're looking into it, you're going to get them an answer, and in 20 minutes you're going to come back and tell them something. And if in 20 minutes you say, I am here with you, it's still being investigated, we're getting the information, they will accept that better than saying, you won't see me for a couple hours because we're under investigation, right? People crave to know. And we never tell them a lie, right? We never try to make them feel better by kind of stretching the truth. And I'm going to tell you what, people a lot of times will say, well, I just don't want to hurt them, so I won't tell them everything. Or I'll tell them they didn't die. They didn't die in pain, or they didn't know what happened. You know, the coroner and the autopsy report's going to say something different. So you've lost your credibility completely. But you know what? You're representing more than just yourself when you're helping people. Aren't you representing this department? So We've got to make a standard that we're going to help them. Now, are you all told certain things that you're not allowed to share with the people at first? Okay. So when they say, you know, and ask a question that ask you, well, do you know anything else that I don't know? How do you answer that? How would you answer that? Because you can't say, well, I don't know, because eventually they might know that you did know. But you're not allowed to tell, so how do you do that? What would you say? Yeah, I'm just throwing things out at you right now, but you better create a plan if you're ever asked those kind of things, because you want to be the most integrity person that they count on. You want to be a safe person, meaning that no matter what, they can count on you, right? Okay, and useful information, timely information. There's information that we give people 2 weeks after something horrible has happened to them. Why? Because when it just happens, they don't need to know that information yet. They're not even asking. For those of you who have ever experienced somebody receiving a death notification, we never tell them what happened. All we say is your daughter died. Your son died. And then, I'm sorry, Tim. And then what happens is they start to process it, and they might ask 3 or more times, what did you say? Are you kidding? They're not even there to ask what happened. They're just still trying to process. Slow time down. You don't have to rush to help these people. Slow time down so that they can catch up to what you've got to do for them. Now, practical assistance is as simple as that. What do they need? Do you ever go out on a call and they're standing outside? Anybody ever had to go through that? They're standing outside, the elements outside. Or they're sitting in your office and they're crying and, you know, their tears are flowing, their nose is flowing. Practical assistance means get them tissue. You know, it's as simple as that. But I am telling you, I'm amazed how many people will just sit while their nose is running and they're doing all of this. And we could just kind of give them practical assistance. Practical assistance. If their phone's ringing, give them some time. Practical assistance. If they are thirsty, get them water. They should have water with them at all times anyway. Practical assistance. Appropriate resources provided when they're ready. We tend to, in homicides, I think one lady said she had 60 business cards by the end of the day. People were just giving her business card after business card. What's she going to do with all those business cards? But guess what? The ones that mattered is the ones that went to the top and got on her refrigerator. The victim advocate that said, I'll be here tomorrow. The detective that said, I'm working your case. And all those other people that just kind of stayed in a pile of business cards. And then justice. People want to be treated fairly. You know as well as I know, most people are surprised or angered by our justice system. Would that be fair to say? Fair to say. And why? Because they watch television. First of all, they think that their homicide case is going to be done with, over in an hour with a commercial. They think that everybody is going to be turning themselves in. They don't see the reality of what the justice system is and how long it is. So you may have more than one dealing with these family members. They want to be treated with respect and dignity. Even if we have to put our judgment, our attitudes, and all of the things that make us triage this case to file it somewhere in our own mind, we need to be able to help them where they are. This is not the time to say, well, why were you there? This is not the time to ask them about their judgment. We've got to be able to help them and give them with respect and dignity. Now, the advocates also need to be able to provide that post-trauma care in the areas of no matter who they are. We're really neutral. We don't say only people from the ages of 18 to 24, do we? We let anybody and everybody be able to be supported. Now, this trauma listening that I'm talking about is something that we train beyond active listening. How many have ever taken an active listening course? Serious? Put that down for next year's agenda. Active listening. Oh my goodness. Do you realize we're not trained to listen? We are not trained to listen, and yet 70% of everything we do listens. And guess what? Most of our listening is not done by words. It's body language. You are already talking to people and asking them questions with your words of your body. Your body language has a lot to say. And if you are not engaged with that person because you're just going to Disneyland tomorrow, so you're physically here, but I'm out of the door, baby, as soon as this one's over with, you don't think they're going to pick that up? Absolutely. It says there, one of the most sincere forms of respect is that we're actually listening to what the other person says. And it's not just hearing words. So this trauma listening that I'm talking about is focused, intentional, deliberate listening. It is literally being able to, if Tim said to me, so what did I just say? That I'd be able to say what your story was. So in this trauma listening, what we have to be able to do is tune out everything else and let them tell their story and not try to imagine what they're saying. I think the worst thing we can do What's it saying? When we listen, we're not talking. They are. And most people do not even get that privilege from the people that love them the most. Talking to you and sharing their story, they're actually looking in their mind's eye the story they're telling you. So as they start their story and they're trying to decide, do I tell them that part? This part? And they're sharing these stories. That's why there's silence. That's why they don't talk a lot, because they're trying to create the next part of their story for you. What ends up happening a lot of times is people are in such a hurry. They got things to do. They ask a question, and that story that they're trying to tell you could go off in a rabbit's tail, and they never tell you what they needed to tell you. So I would suggest to my trauma responders that when you're with a person, it is the most uncomfortable thing to not be talking or having somebody talk. Tell me what happened. Are you willing to tell me what happened? And you just sit there. I had one psychologist work with me with a group of people, 200 in a room. She said, we're all here to tell our stories. Who would like to start? And for 20 minutes, nobody talked. Would you feel a little bit uncomfortable with that? I was. Believe me, I'm just like sweating at this point. But as soon as the first person talked, never had to say another thing. But what happened was, when the first person talked, everybody was getting their stories ready. They were doing a lot of thinking of how we're going to tell this story of what collectively happened to us. Now, this bottom one I want to talk to you about real quick, and that is do not self-disclose. Most of the time we get into social work because of our own lives. Is that fair to say? We're experts at trauma because we've lived through it. Or we're drawn to people that are hurting because we know we can help them. Either way, we either have scars or scabs. Hopefully you all have scars. A scar is nothing more than something that you can visibly or internally see, knowing that you hurt one time, but you healed. You got better. But scabs, y'all know what a scab is. Disgusting. They're that hard, crusty thing that is all infected, thread, yucky. And as soon as something happens, trigger, it breaks open, affects you, and affects whoever is around you, right? You can't have scabs helping other people in trauma. You've got to be able to help people help themselves, and you've got to help yourself. So how do we get our scabs to be scars? Continue healing. But self-disclosing in somebody else's story does not help. How many times have you had a story that you wanted to share with someone and they just jumped in and took over the conversation? Every day, let's be honest, every day. You could say something as simple as, I went to go see the movie, throw in one. And the person you just told that to jumps and told you how they saw the movie, what they thought about it, and you're sitting there going, okay. We call that conversation bullies. And we all tend to do it. But you know, when you're with somebody that you've been assigned to work their case, you can't jump in. First of all, no matter what has ever happened to you, they could care less. Because it's major what has happened to them. It's minor what has happened to you. Anybody ever gone into the hospital for surgery? Nobody? Boy, healthy group back here, okay. Go into surgery and you told somebody and they had that same surgery. And they can up you one because they had it twice. So what? I had my husband in the hospital once. He was going through surgery and a guy walked in. His friend walked in. He's looking at him going, Frank, you're going to wish you had died. The most painful surgery in the world. He's like, I'll see you in about 10 days because you're not going to be even out of it before then. And we're like, go away, go away. And he thought he was helping. Self-disclosing doesn't help at that time. However, I back up to say this. Sometimes people will look at you and go, you can't possibly understand what I'm going through because you've never had a baby die or you've never had a mother killed or you've never, you know, and they're kind of in your face. Be cautious if it did happen to you. Just share that story. And it could be that you say to them, I've experienced something similar, but right now it's about you. Is that fair? I'm going to give you all a 5-minute break. Shall I give you a 5-minute break? so I can cough some more. Thank you. 5 minutes. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? So Mika was good enough to tell me that many of you don't even see these people in person. Is that right? And so you have an added advantage because you're hearing their tone. You know, we talk to people and we pick up their body language, so we're able to think sparing or very angry or very stoic or whatever like that. But you all probably have such a radar in hearing that tone change. And that's what you will use the sense that you have that works best for you. Your eyes don't work. Your ears will work. So you're trying to listen not only to what they are saying, but what they're not saying. And so as I was sharing, people in crisis, when you're talking to them and telling their story, they should be able to tell it a couple different ways. And it should only be about an hour. Now, I know you have to ask questions and everything to get to where you need to be too. But we don't let anybody go beyond an hour in a crisis talk or counseling. But I want to assure you, when you are working with people in crisis and you're with them for an hour, it's like working an 8-hour day. Exhausting, isn't it? So just off the track, but just for self-care, please don't make a phone call right away. If nothing else, get up, walk around your room, go get something to drink, you know, do that deep breathing exercise, something so that you're ready to go to the next one. I don't know your schedule, but I know sometimes I used to piggyback counseling sessions one on another. And by the end of the day, I was like, felt beat up. You can't emotionally take on all of that without having some kind of R&R. And I've got to tell you, one of the easiest things you can do is deep breathe with 3 minutes of silence. And you can really start building yourself back up just with something as simple as that. So much of what we do is not rocket science, but it's the hardest thing to do. That and to prove that, how many of us are our perfect weight? How many of us get 8 hours sleep, right? Easy stuff. Can't do it. I'm sorry, ice cream's medicinal. Every night. Okay, so just again, even on the phone, if somebody says you don't understand or try to give you into deflecting from what they have to share with you, you don't buy into it by sharing that self-disclosure. The best you can do is let them know you've experienced something similar, but it's not about you. Maybe another time, another day, right? Get them back on track. Sometimes people are really in that recoil stage still, and they just don't want to accept the fact that it has happened. And I'll tell you, the ones that have their family members, the ones that are the perpetrators, and it just gets muddier and muddier. So what do I do? All right, so I've got something that I want to show you. We're going to play a card game. You want to do that? Right after, okay. So because I'm a real visual person, I had to bring my 52 card pickup, big cards, so everybody can see them. Okay, so we're going to show you what you're going to do by listening to people, helping people, talking to people in crisis. This is 52. Please don't make me shuffle them. Okay, so somebody has to come up here and pick a card. And the rest of you are going to pick what it is. So who's a volunteer? Who's a volunteer? Come on, don't make me pick you out. Come on, Tim. I hurt your ears. That's the least I can do.
Tim gets to do this.
Now, don't show them, but pick one. Let me see. Which one? Okay, hold it. Don't let them see it. Okay, so Tim, flip it over so nobody sees it.
Okay.
And stand next to me. Tim has picked a number card that has a number on it. You are going to tell me what he picked. Anybody want to try so far? All right, so I'm going to tell you how you're going to do this. So the first thing I'm going to ask, I have to ask a couple of questions. So tell me what the cards, the different suits in a card deck are. Spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs. Everybody agree with that? Okay, so now tell me 5 numbers in sequence. Give me 5 numbers in sequence, because we already know there's not a face card that he picked. So 5 numbers in sequence. Okay, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now tell me which suit she wanted to do. Pick one of those suits. Hearts, diamonds, clubs, or spades? Hearts. And he said hearts. Okay, well, we'll go on. Give me another suit of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Would that be spades, diamonds, or clubs? Clubs.
Sorry.
Is that what she just picked? Yes. Thank you. That was pretty easy. So how does that apply to you in helping talk to people and what to say to people? See, I knew, and Tim knew, what card he had picked. But you got to pick it. And the way we did it is ask the correct questions. But the reason why we do that with people in crisis is they have lost complete control of a situation, right? If they're saying things like, I never thought this would happen to me, and they're saying things like, why did this happen to me? They've got to take some kind of ownership of feeling like they're going to be able to get back in some kind of new kind of normal, some control. So as you're asking them questions to help them make wise choices, they've got to own those, right? Instead of you saying, you need to, you ought to, you should, we're helping them, guiding them all along. Just like what we just did. We ask the correct questions so that they think they're making the decisions on their own, but you're guiding them as well. Make sense? Isn't that cool? Want to see the rabbit jump out of my head? Oh, no. Don't have time for that. All right. So what am I going to do? How am I going to help? All right, so here we go. Your role, the need versus the want. Don't you sometimes have a conflict with what you want to do for them? What you need to do for them? Of course you do, because you want to help people. All right, so first of all, you've got to be able to be educated in how you're going to help people. You're going to be contagious. I love that matchstick. You're going to be empowered by able to empower them. And remember this, effective is not always efficient, and efficient is not always effective. When you're empowering other people, honestly, the #1 thing people will say is that you listened to me. You really listened to me. That's going to be when you have to ask certain questions. Of course you're going to, because you're doing a job to validate if they get their funds or compensation or whatever like that. So you're going to have to ask very sterile questions. This is not about how you doing today, Tim. It's all about, answering qualifying questions. But in the mix of that qualifying questions, you're going to be able to help them and acknowledge their feelings. Some of the things that you'll find is that privacy, in relative to what you're doing, they might not be able to keep that privacy. You might need that as an answer to further helping get the end results. Offering to spend time with others, that really wouldn't apply to you. Getting reliable resources, hopefully before you end your conversation, you're able to be able to give them even something different that maybe they called for. And then always being open. How many times do you generally talk to somebody? You don't see the victims, but how often do you talk to the same person? Maybe once? Twice? Sometimes? Has anybody ever talked to somebody more than like 20 times? Yeah, okay. So it really depends on the person. Well, of course you're going to be talking at a different level the 20th time than you did that first time, okay? So there's different kinds of support groups. You really actually are part of their support group. Now we have 4 different kinds. The bad way is to have a very big glass of beer. That's not the right kind of support system we want people to have. But the other kind of support system looks like this. Me is them. or it could be you. Me is them. All right, so the emotional support system is family and friends that are emotionally invested in the person. Is that you? No. And that's why you can be compassionate and detached, that you're helping that person, that you have the privilege of being a part of their help, not a part of them fixing themselves. And that gives us some reassurance that we don't have to take on their burden. Now, the emotional is what most people desire to have. If we ask them, what kind of support systems do you want? Most want somebody that cares about them, cries with them, stays with them, that kind of thing. That should be family and friends. But we find in crisis times, families can actually harm people by their words. We're going to get to these cliches. By the words that they say. You might be just the effective person that they share. Do you know what my mom said to me? And help start that repair again. They need that mom. They need that friend. They need that loved one. But there is so much time a severing or almost a rip in their friendships and family ships because of what people say, thinking they're meaning well. So you might hear that because they don't know who else to say it to. But I believe we are the objective support. And that is the group of people like you that see the bigger picture and have things available for them. You're seeing the bigger picture. And then there's the instrumental. Those are things that are people or support people that do things for the person in crisis. Would that be you? You do things for them, right? You're going to give them compensation. And then the last one is informational. That's people that have resources. That's you again. So look how many places you can be a support system without taking on their emotions. All right. And then we have, what do I say? Your words, the message. You are powerful in what you say to them. Your words matter. They carry weight. You are the authority. They are looking to you for hope. So what is your messages? Well, first of all, we get rid of cliches. And how many of us, because we don't know what to say, we fall back on things we've heard in the past. And they must work because everybody in the world's still saying them. So we're going to quickly go over this. Cliches are, I say they're mindless phrases that people use because they don't know what else to say. Cliches hurt and they harm. And we've got to be careful that even in our vocation and what we are able to offer people, that we don't fall into these cliches. So here's some of the cliches. Number one that people say they wish people would stop saying is, I know exactly how you feel. I understand. Watch when you say that when people, I understand. I haven't slept tonight. I understand. That is translating to them in a negative way. We don't understand why they're not sleeping. We don't understand why they cry all the night. We don't even understand why they're so upset with this person dying and they weren't upset when their own mother died. We don't understand. We can't possibly put ourselves in their shoes at that time. So we want to eliminate that expression. How many has heard that expression? Well, dear, time does heal. You know, time doesn't heal. It is not a Band-Aid. It is not Mercurochrome. It is, time is a measurement, and it measures people from here to there. So if we wanted to say anything, it's like the time, you will notice as time goes on that you're able to move from one place to another. One thing we can guarantee people in a crisis is that this is a promise. Sometimes they just need to cling on to something. The truth is, in crisis, they will never be the same, or they will never be in the same pain or the same way a year later as they were in that moment. It can't be. And if they just can't be. It isn't, because every breath they take moves them a little further away from that explosion that changed their life forever. Fair? So time doesn't heal. The next one is, if you need anything, just call me. Now, I'm not asking you to raise your hand, but how often do we say that to people? Because we really do want them to call us if they need. But if people are in crisis, they should never ask for help again. So if you haven't finalized anything, or you still feel like they're not really getting everything that they need, you might be able to say something like, how about if I call you back again tomorrow? How about if I call you after I hear something? Instead of, if you need anything, just call me. That's really a cop-out. Okay. Oh, all things work for the good. You know, sometimes we kind of over-spiritualize things. All things work for the good. I'm telling you what, when you have been in a crisis, you don't see beyond now. We are definitely in the moment. And so to think that this is all going to work out for good, like I said, sometimes it takes a lot longer for it to help. You know, it's been blank years. You really need to get over this and move on. Now, you might have people say how frustrated they are because they're still calling you to get claims that they haven't received months later. And they're frustrated because they're going back. They're still there because they haven't been able to process everything yet. And family and friends want to hurry up and get over it. We never get over it, do we? Just like closure. Don't use that word. Don't use closure. There is no such thing as closure. See? I set myself up. You need closure. The funeral was such closure. What does that mean? They close their book. They close their life. They close off their heart. It doesn't even make sense. No closure. You are young. You can have another child, or at least you have 2 other children. Cruel. These are cruel statements that people actually still make today. I'm shocked that people will still make that. So as you are doing this claims, I don't see this as an opportunity to say something like that. But do you see how people, if a child was murdered and they're an adult, but they have 3 little ones, that's not comforting. One child doesn't replace another child. Hello. There's a reason for everything. Why do we say that? Why do we try to reason this out? I'm telling you what, there's evil in the world. We all know that, right? I believe there's evil in the world, and I believe that there's no reason why that child should have had that happen to them, but the fact that that person wanted to do something bad, and that child was right there, the opportunity met. But the reason for everything, you know, I'm just a slow learner when I'm being told, you know, everything that happens to you, you're going to learn something from it. Mm-hmm. You're young, you'll find someone else. Your husband's murdered. You're 30 years old. How comforting is that? Well, you're young, honey. Now, honestly, I've been around a lot of young people that have had their loved ones killed. And honestly, they usually do remarry. But that's not the right time to say it. Let them tell you, right? Some of these things are just truth, but we let them tell us instead of we tell them. Okay, have you ever heard of any other cliches that people, even in your profession, might say that we want to say, maybe we shouldn't say that? Any other cliches or anything that we, you know, everything's going to be all right? Could have been worse. Seriously? This too shall pass. It was God's will. God needed him more than you. Well, as a chaplain, I get all of those. Yeah. God wanted your baby to be a rosebud in his garden. Really? Seriously? It just doesn't even make sense. I want to say, are you kidding me? So, but we want to be the ones that no further harm. And honestly, you might be the one that if somebody says things like that to you, do they share sometimes their frustration with their family and friends to you all? No. Well, you're lucky, because sometimes they're just so frustrated they don't know who to share it with. But when they do share those kind of things, we always talk about just be the teacher. Tell them what didn't help them. Tell them what did help them. Okay, I love this. The target of care, and I'm not talking about the store. Target of care. So it's call out, care in. Call out, care in. So the bullseye is the direct victim. That's that person that is working, that you're probably working with. The direct victim, and only the direct victim is allowed to call out, to cry out, to shout out, to be mad, to have all kinds of spiritual, behavior, emotional, cognitive behavior. They shouldn't have to worry that they hurt your feelings. They are allowed to cry out. Now, everybody else, see the yellow arrows? I intentionally put the yellow arrows like that because each yellow arrow ends at a different ring. You see that? So like that lower left one is in the right, the white ring next to the direct victim. You see that? So that's probably best friend or spouse or mom or dad. Those are those ones that are the closest to that direct victim. And they're caring in. They're giving them all the support they can. They're supporting them financially and emotionally, and they're helping them. Okay, and then we have the real long arrow that really begins outside the target. That's probably mother-in-law, next door neighbor, a looky-loo that heard about it and comes over, coworker that never ever spoke to you before and now all of a sudden wants to know everything about everything. So they're way out there, right? But every one of those yellow arrows are supposed to be caring in. And no matter what that person in the middle cries out with, they are crying out for help. And those people are caring in to help. Now, watch this with the blue. So wherever those people are positioned in that ring of care, they are allowed to turn around. So here's the direct victim, and I'm caring into them. Then I can turn around and cry out. Everybody on the rings outside of me. You see how that looks? So the blue is all the carrying out. So I'm caring for the direct victim. She's crying out, crying out, crying out. I turn around, and now I'm crying out to my best friends. I'm crying out to help, that people will help me so I can turn back around and help her or him. Does that make sense? One of the things that we find that people that are uncomfortable with this mode believes that they should be able to cry in to the person instead of care in. No, you don't have that right. And that direct victim should never have to worry about, did I hurt their feelings? Did I remember to say this? Did I remember to do this? My goodness. The best we can do for that direct victim is to say, it's okay. They don't hurt themselves, hurt anybody else, hurt you. It's okay. How you feel is okay. Target of care. Now, as we talk to people, get their information, you're going to do your job because you're stellar professionals. You want the best for these people. You're going to be able to triage these people mentally. And what I mean by that is it's not you're judging people. You are triaging people to be able to know where you're going to put them in your heart and your mind. And when you are doing your very best to get them what compensation they deserve, remember, you can only do your best. Do what is right. Sometimes you have to choose from two rights instead of right and wrong. Do their very best. Remember that you will never be able to restore everyone's losses. If they are allowed and compensated $100,000, I don't know if they are, $100,000, it still will never be enough. $55 million, still not enough. We don't fix anyone's trauma, but with you having a listening ear and helping that person tell their story, therapeutically, they are actually being able to resolve what they need to do. They need to pour those words out so they can hear what they're thinking. Remember that it's primarily your peaceful, loving presence, or even on the phone, that will help more than anything you say or what you do to serve people. And then ultimately, remember the significant positive effects your presence may have on victims' lives will not usually be apparent to them for years to come. It's very rare that people thank us to do a death notification. It's very rare in the midst of being a victim that they thank us, but I've heard it happen. And most of the time, because they never wanted to join that club of victim, they didn't want to be in that membership. It's just a lot of times we're the reminder of where they are. Get your validation. Get your accomplishments from what you're doing internally. Don't depend on external things for you to feel like it's worthwhile. And self-care, I really believe that self-care is the way you listen to one another, and the way you take care of one another will help you take care of other people. If you don't take care of yourself, how can you really take care of other people, right? If you don't actually, I think it's very ethical to say self-care is ethical. It's part of ethics. If we don't take care of ourselves, then really how can we say to somebody, no, you need to do these things to take care of yourself? So these daily routines, when I'm talking about that crisis phone call that you're on, you really have to be able to stay in a routine of how you do it and when you do it. You also, and see, I just love this, because although we talk about the senses that we have, the smell, sight, touch, taste, hearing, I think we miss out when we don't talk about the sense of humor. Now, I'm sure you all have a sense of humor, and you probably got a bad sense of humor, don't you? You probably make fun of weird things, right? But you know what? It's okay not, and I assure you, nothing's funny about tragedy. Nothing's funny about trauma. But there are things that happen in the midst of that you can sit back and just take a breather for a while. How many has ever been to a funeral? Raise your hand. Okay. Have you ever been to a funeral and somebody says something like, and yeah, Joe, he just loved cats. And everybody just breaks out laughing, and you're like, what? You're not sure what's going on. Then everybody kind of builds on cats. Oh yeah, remember cat, fluffy cat. Oh yeah, and everybody's laughing. Well, it's an inside joke, or it's a joke about Joe. But what is happening is it is a breather. And in tragedies and traumas and the things that are put on your shoulders for that temporary time, there's got to be something that you can take a breather and laugh about. Not laughing again at the crisis or that person, but laughing. Most of the time we can get a lot of laughter out of ourselves, right? I tell you what, biggest laughter we have is things like running into doors and getting lost and all those kind of things. And we talk about it, we can laugh about it because it's a stress relief. So if you've got a weird sense of humor, just count me in, because I love to talk about weird sense of humors. But laughter is like medicine. And then time management. When I say slow down time when you're with the family, whether you're on the phone or in their presence, slowing down time is literally something we have the privilege to do. And if you are deliberately, intentionally, and focused listening, you're going to find you do slow down time. Because most people want not to hear the whole story so they can hurry up and fix it for them, or tell them they're wrong, or tell them what they think. You are going to be able to hear what they have to say. To help you, please tell me blah, blah, blah. And you be able to help them. And then slow down. Now, healthy eating, like I said, I've already given you permission. Ice cream, medicinal, Baskin and Robbins, be there. Okay. And exercise. Oh, that's what we'll all need to do after this meeting. We're all going to run around the building, okay? It's so easy. But it's not, is it? It's not. After you do a whole day of working with people, are you not exhausted when you go home? People, that's because you have been emotionally drained because of the crisis. How do we fix that cycle? Because it's so much easier just to sit down. I guarantee you, after you started working this, I don't know how long you've all worked in here, but haven't you changed that you don't want to do a lot of talking? Once you go home, it's like, I don't want to talk. Let's just play remote fever, right? And then because you have to make such huge decisions for these families, they really are depending on you to take in what they've said to you and help them. Is it hard to make decisions when you get home? Come on, be honest. Honey, where do you want to go out to eat? I don't care. Anywhere. Okay, well, let's go out to pizza. I don't want to go to pizza. Well, where do you want to go? Oh, I don't care. You want to go get some Mexican food? No, not Mexican food. Well, where do you want to go? I don't care. Have I been in your house lately? Mm-hmm. It's so easy because we just get emotionally drained. And when we go home, that's our safe haven to just say, ugh. However, there's a problem if you've got a human being living there with you, because they want to do something outrageous like talk. They want to hear about your day. They want to tell you about their day. You just want to say, shut up and leave me alone. So we've got to actually work on taking care of ourselves and work on staying engaged with the people that matter the most. So, and then embrace a positive facet. Now I know our imagination, if we can feel it, if we can imagine it, we can feel it. I know because you're hearing the story, your ears are picking up pictures. Please be sure that at the end of the night, you reframe your whole day. You can remember every person you talk to, but reframe your day with something positive. Maybe that you know you're going to be able to win this case for them. Maybe it's just because you slowed down and saw a whole field of buttercups. I don't care. Maybe it's because your best team won. Savor the moment, because that positive aspect right before you sleep at night helps you get better sleep. Please turn off the television. Stop watching the news, especially if you're on a case that's still being revived in the media. And hydrate. We don't drink enough water. You know, if you find yourself have a lot of headaches because you do this job, it's because you need hydration. It's as simple as that. Keep drinking lots of water. They say whatever your weight is divided by half, that's how much water you should be drinking every day. Of course, be close to a bathroom, but we'll talk about that another time. Okay. All right. So questions. I've talked to you a lot. I've told you some ideas to build up to talking to people. Told you how to talk to people. Questions?
Just wondering, how do the chaplains and the advocates coordinate their efforts to help victims?
Good question. So we're local, and a lot of times we start with the DA's victim assistance. Your victim's compensation, right? So we're 24/7, so we're available anytime, any place. Sometimes somebody gets picked up by DA's office before we even have helped them. It might be that they were taken to a hospital, and by the time they're released, we just haven't picked them up. So the coordinated effort is that it's just right now, just the head knowledge that we're available and you're all available. There are cases that we have worked together with, big cases, but we also make ourselves available. If somebody calls us from this office, we're available to help. And a lot of times we've helped over the years for you. When your coworker has terminal illness, when your coworker, and this was in the 90s, when her daughter was killed at a high school, she worked for you all. She doesn't work for you now, but she worked for you all. So we came in after she was gone for 3 months to teach you how to help her. Because guess what? It was freaky. People were saying, I don't know what to say, so I'll ignore her. She's in the bathroom, I'll wait until she comes out. So we teach you all trauma, because here's the thing. We can train in this all we want, but when we become the victim, it's a whole different story. All our training gets put aside, and now the emotion starts. So we do need each other when it's happening to us, right? That's the two ways. And we've got some great connections with the Candies and the Mikas and all, Rachel's. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Okay.
So I've just been working here for about 2 months in victims compensation in the program here. And is our focus here only on traumas related to crime, or do we help families who have experienced some type of loss? For example, if there was a terminal illness in their family, if that family member has experienced loss, the people who are left, the survivors, experience trauma, do we provide any assistance to them, or is that outside of this department? I don't know. I'm sure that's a silly
You
question.
want to answer that? Okay.
Yeah, our program only serves victims who are a victim of a crime, and that's even limited. It's a qualifying crime.
So we would help internally. We would help you all if you had experienced some type of loss personally. But if you all have a resource, if you have a family member that you're working with and now another loss has come into their lives that you really can't help them with, call us. I mean, we should work in partnerships. Our collaboration with victims compensation has been for years. We could only get better. Good.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
We had a former coworker that received notification of the death of a loved one via posted on the door, and I was just horrified. And I don't know if you work for the county or the city, but what is the policy? I mean, was that just because maybe a chaplain wasn't available, or how do they pick and choose? But I just...
So here's the thing. We have begged the coroner to let us do these death notifications. They do 26 death notifications a day. We don't have that many chaplains to do because of, remember, we do a death notification. It takes 2 hours if we're going to do it right? On the average. So if a note is left and we are told, okay, there's a law that says we have an hour by the time the coroner gives us the notification to tell the next of kin. So we have an hour to do this. If we go there and there's nobody home, we will have these chaplains knock on neighbors' doors, not expose what's happening, but just say, do you know where this neighbor is? We have some important information. It's amazing how we think our neighbors don't know us. Baby, you are being watched. Anyway, so if we can't get there, we'll call back to the coroner. But here's what we try to do. And we go over and out of our way. Instead of leaving that card, we'll come back in 3 hours. Now, it has to be noted that we've tried, because honestly, there's a lawsuit still pending that somebody didn't make a correct notification. Not on ours, but across the country. So, but our chaplains will go back every 3 hours to see if that person's still there, instead of leaving that note, with the permission of the coroner. But if they say, just leave it, then what we do is get permission the next day to follow up, because it's not our information, it's the coroner's. So we can only go with what he allows us to do, but we will go there. And I've got to tell you how many times that works. Because yes, they read this awful paper, but somebody's knocking on the door and saying, can we explain that paper to you? Is there anything we can help you with? That is not the ideal way to do it. But I'm going to tell you, we worked for 2 days to find the parents of a young man who committed suicide in Oregon. And it's like, we cannot let this go. They had moved. People didn't know. I mean, I feel like sometimes chaplains are detectives because we are just not going to give up. We finally found them in another county. So we didn't even get to give them the notification. But, you know, people, I think what we do, you all, victims advocates, chaplains, we give dignity back to outrageous things. It's outrageous that people have been assaulted, murdered, victimized in any way. It's outrageous. So the best we can do is give them back respect and dignity. Yep, that's how we did it. Who else?
Other questions or comments?
Oh, I can hear you, but they can't hear you. Let's hear you. Oh, come on. The comment? It will go on vacation and come right back to you. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just going to make a comment that sometimes in talking to some of our victims over the phone, because we don't see them, you know, on a one-on-one as some of the JP counties do, people will say the you. And I've learned over time, they're not talking about me per se, but people that they've dealt with in their situation. So I find myself, I've learned to step back. Okay, I hear that you're upset, and then let them talk, but trying to bring them back to what it is that they really need assistance.
Right.
When I first started, I didn't understand what that was about, but through experience, I've learned it's not about me.
That's right.
Talking about, yeah.
And you don't have to defend. You know, you did this, you did that, this company did this. You know, you don't have to defend that. What people want is to be heard. So the expression, no worries, is offensive. Or no problem, that's offensive. Because there is a problem, or I wouldn't be sharing it with you. Right? So we want to make sure we don't placate these people, but hear them out. Tell me what happened. And then you've got to really listen, because they're going to talk in layers of garbage. You know, when we communicate horrible stuff, it's kind of like looking at a trash can. The first thing you talk about is the fluffy stuff that's the last stuff before it goes out in the trash can. But it's that slimy stuff we got to get them to talk about, right? So that as they're talking into those deeper levels, that's where it hurts. That's where it's not been resolved. So yeah, absolutely. And we can't take it personally, but let me tell you what, who doesn't take it personally? But when somebody says, I hate you, I mean, I take it personally. But I also know they're just striking out in pain because they've gone into that recoil stage. They're trying to survive, and I'm going to do it any which way I can. I don't care who's in my way. So it's just that anger, because honestly, if you look through that anger, they're probably feeling a panic. They're probably feeling a fear. They're probably feeling emotional pain. So it's that anger you see, but this is all that's stirring. Boy, that's easier when you see them instead of just hear them. Did this help at all? Who wants to be a chaplain? I've got business cards up here. I would love to stand beside you and help you any which way we can. This month is coming up is Victims Day.
Awareness.
I'm so glad. I've worked with victims all my life, and how horrible they were treated. And we're getting somewhere, and then we're going backwards. I think we're going backwards a little bit now with AB 109, and don't get me started on that. But if we can just take care of the victims, we're not just taking care of an individual, we're taking care of their family, we're taking care of a community. It's going to cost a lot less healthy people than broken people. Yes, ma'am? Oh, Well, we're trying, because law enforcement, bless their hearts, they're so cheap. So we're just saying, will you buy a chaplain a cup of coffee? And it's like, well, of course I will. At Starbucks, of course I will. And I said, well, then that's what we want you to donate every pay period. I thought that was easy. And then they go, we're not going to do that. What? No, actually that was the easiest sell so far. Usually it's like United Way and everything. The thing is, our services are free. And so, we're 24 hours around the clock. And it's just people like you that keep us out there helping people. And when we answer those questions, what, where, why, and all that, you answer really, why should I care? I hope I never knock at your door, but I guarantee you if I do, or one of my chaplains do, you will not be alone. We will help you.
I have another question, Mindy. Just on the safety aspect of your job, do you go out in teams? Because I'm sure you go to some scary places.
We do go to scary places. We have a lot of safety issues in place. So when we do a death notification, honestly, we are everywhere. And our officers don't have the time to go with us. However, saying that, we call, after the coroner calls us, we call dispatch to whatever area we're in, and we'll tell them, we're going to 200 Main Street. Then they check their CAD to see if there was any law enforcement issues. And if they have, they might say, don't go, or we'll send an officer. And then our chaplains are empowered to say, I'm not comfortable here. I mean, we have literally knocked on doors where this was one that was really weird. The chaplains knocked on the door and the guy said, go away. And it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. And he says, sir, we have some information. Is Mrs. Clark there? Yes, go away, or I'll call the police. Bring it on. Okay. Well, they know where we are. So they go in the car and they call the call out person and say, what do you want us to do? Well, he did call the police. Well, he was a knucklehead because he was beating up his wife. So he's calling the police on us, and the police comes over, and now he's not just nicely knocking on the door. It's like, open up. So the guy opens up, and here's Mrs. Clark on the floor with a black eye. So we did two things that night. We first took care of her, then we gave her the death notification, and we didn't rush that. We slowed down time. Amazing story. Oh, I am going to write a book. One of these days, you all are going to laugh at this book because, as I said, Mark Twain said once, tragedy and time equals humor. And it's true. You want to hear one and you will never forget. We're not on tape right now, are we? Put me off. Oh, I can't tell you then. Wrap it up. I'll tell them the funniest story they'll never forget. Can you turn me off?
Final questions? All right.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Mindy,
everybody.
so much for coming. Applause, applause.